Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Tuesday, and it's another wet evening in LA. Man, we could. It's always good. It's always good. Drought in Southern California. It's always good to get more. It's the word. Oh my gosh, we get older and we cannot remember words. Not perspiration. I feel so stupid. Anyway, it's good to get more water here in Southern California, falling from the sky. I can't believe I can't come up with the word. Anyway, it would be good if we could capture it here in the city of LA. Sadly, we can't, but most of this will make it to the mountains where it's captured as snow. And then it does get captured for the benefit of California. Anyway, let's light up the darkness. Oh, it's such a curse. Precipitation. Thank you, Lucy. You knew what I meant. We get older and these words on the tip of our tongue and just don't come out. Anyway, welcome Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Sharon in New Jersey, Nancy, North Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota, Paul in the Great Northwest, Bella in Florida, Paul in Chicago, John in Maine, Melissa in Great Neck, Shandora in the Bronx, Guy in Ohio, David in Indiana, Franco in Trieste, Joe in the Inland Empire, Karen in Northern California, Ryan in Jacksonville, Florida, and Joe also helping me with the word I was missing. Ay, getting old. Ella's in the house, Ilanit in Silver Spring, Marjorie in Georgia, and Marie, I think, in Freeport, right? Welcome, everybody. Okay, our daf today is page 95 here in Tractate Bava Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud. We are continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 here in chapter 9. And we're really talking about this idea that if a robber takes something, okay, he has to make restitution. But if while he possessed, while he had this object in his possession that he stole, he enhanced it. It was an animal, and he fattened it. It was wood, and he built it into something that took labor, effort, further resources. One of the questions was, if the thing was fundamentally changed, does that mean that he acquires the object? And when he comes to make restitution, what he owes is money. If he owes money, how much does he owe? Generally speaking, the value of the object that he stole at the time that he stole it. But what if it was a field or a plant that was ready to be harvested, a cow that was ready to give birth, a sheep that was ready to be shorn? Do we give the value, of a sheep that was ready to be shorn? Or the fact that he stole and a few weeks later he, sheared it and all that wool came off that had a certain market value. Are we going to assess that value? Are we not? These are the issues under consideration. We pick this up just a couple paragraphs from the top on page 95a. The Mishnah teaches if one robbed another of a pregnant cow and it then gave birth while in the robber's possession, or if one robbed another of a ewe, E-W-E, that was laden with wool, and the robber then sheared it, so he pays the owner the value of the cow that is ready to give birth, or the value of a ewe that is ready to be shorn. In connection with this, the sages taught in a baraisa, one who robs another of a ewe and sheared it, and similarly, one who robs another of a cow and it gave birth, must pay it and its sheared wool, or it and its offspring. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says a stolen item is returned as is. Rabbi Shimon says a stolen item is viewed as though it had been monetarily appraised at the time of the robbery, and the robber pays only that amount. So now the Gemara clarifies these different opinions in a baraisa. So, in this baraisa, a dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir, who holds that the robber returns the animal and its sheared wool, or the animal and its offspring? Is it due to the fact that he holds that despite a change, the changed item remains in its place? Meaning, despite its changes, the animal always remained in the possession of the robbery victims, and consequently any increase in value belongs to them. Or perhaps Rabbi Meir generally holds that one does acquire an item due to a change in it, and therefore the wool or the offspring should belong to the robber, but here it is a penalty that Rabbi Meir imposes which forces the robber to return items that are technically his, right? He took it, obviously had no right to take it. While it was in his possession, the animal gave birth. Who knows? Maybe he paid a big vet bill, a big vet bill to the veterinarian to help the animal give birth. And so he feels like, well, look, what I took was a pregnant cow or a pregnant sheep. So I'll pay you the value of a pregnant cow or a pregnant sheep. But I became attached to the lamb or the calf in the meantime, and I paid for the cost of its delivery, etc. So I'm going to keep that. Or do we say, and that does seem to be where we've been, particularly in view of the ordinance for the benefit of the penitent, right? That we saw that the sages made it a little bit easier for a robber to atone for his wicked ways. And so that he could get back on the straight and narrow, they kind of eased his passage into it. And here Rabbi Meir is saying, yeah, no. You stole from a farmer who thought, oh, my cow, wonderful, he's about to give birth. Then I'm going to have both a calf and a cow, and it's going to mean a lot, to my family, a very modest means. And then this robber came and took it. It was a disaster for the farmer. And now that the cow is being returned to him, yeah, it should come with its offspring as well. I mean, it could certainly understand what Rabbi Meir's point of view. I'm sure it would be shared by the victim of the robbery. So the Gemara explains, in what case does the reasoning of Rabbi Meir make a practical difference, whether this is being done as a penalty or not? In a case where the stolen item was devalued since the time of the robbery. So if Rabbi Meir's reason is that despite a change, the changed item remains in its place, so it is returned as is, even if its current value is less than what its value had been at the time of the robbery. But if he requires the robber to return the item itself because of a penalty, and by right the robber acquired the animal due to the change, then in this case where the value of the object decreased while it was in the possession of the robber would be required to return what its value had been at the time of the robbery, which is what we would want. So the Gemara attempts to find a solution to this question. Come in here, what was taught in the Mishna on page 96b. So tomorrow's daf. So if one robbed another of an animal, and it aged while in his possession, consequently diminishing its value, or if one robbed another of slaves and they aged, so he pays according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. Rabbi Meir says, meaning minority opinion, with regard to slaves, the robber says to the owner, that which is yours is before you. And the Gemara comments, but this indicates that with regard to an animal, as opposed to a slave, that aged while in the possession of the robber, Rabbi Meir concedes to the first Tana, and he too holds that he pays according to what its value had been at the time of the robbery. And if it enters your mind to say that Rabbi Meir holds that despite a change, the changed item remains in its place, then the animal should be returned as it is in the case of the animal that aged as well, meaning its value diminished because it got older. And rather, must one not conclude from the Mishnah that Rabbi Meir holds that one acquires an item due to a change in the item? But here, in the case of a stolen animal that subsequently was shorn or gave birth, the payment of wool or offspring is a penalty with which he, Rabbi Meir, penalizes the robber so that the robber will not benefit from the increased value of the stolen item. And the sages say in response that Rabbi Meir's reasoning cannot be proven from the Mishnah, since it is possible to say that Rabbi Meir is speaking to the rabbis in accordance with the rabbi's own statement. like this. His statement should be understood like this. According to my own opinion, one does not acquire an item due to a change in the item, right? It remains in its place. It remains the property of the one who's the victim of the robbery. And an animal that was stolen and then aged should be returned as it is now as well. But according to you, who say that one acquires an item due to a change in it, agree with me in any event that with regard to a slave, he is returned as is. And this is because his legal status is like that of real estate, and real estate cannot be stolen. Meaning the ownership does not ever change just because it was stolen. Even somebody grabbed it forcefully, whatever. He does not acquire title to the land. And generally, halakhically speaking, when we're talking about slavery as it was practiced in the ancient world, slaves are treated like real property. They are inherited like real property, and deals are made, regarding slaves like deals are made regarding real property. And so the rabbis say to Rabbi Meir in response, no. For the purpose of robbery and the laws of robbery, the legal status of a slave is like that of movable property and not like real property, just in this area of the law. So the Gemara again attempts to find the solution to the question. Come in here what was taught in the Mishna on page 100b. If one gave wool to a dyer to dye it red for him, and he dyed it black, or it was given to the dyer to dye it black, and he dyed it red. So Rabbi Meir says the dyer gives the owner of the wool the value of his wool, since the dyer violated the owner's wishes. Right now, this is permanent dye. It can't be undone. I wanted my sheep's wool to be dyed black. He dyed it red. This is permanent damage from my point of view. So I want the value of the wool that I gave to the dyer. And that's what Rabbi Meir grants me. Now, it can be inferred from this Mishnah, the value of his wool, yes, the dyer must give it to the owner of the wool. But the value of his wool and its enhancement, i.e. the amount by which the value of the wool increased because it was dyed, no, he need not give it, right? Because even the dyer did not dye it the color that I wanted. So he owes me the value of the wool, the raw wool that I gave him. But he put in the labor to dye it a color. It's the wrong color. I don't want it that color. But a certain amount of labor was added to that wool. So now that wool is actually worth more money than when the owner of the wool gave it to the dyer. It has been dyed. Right? So now the dyer, because he dyed it the wrong color, he has to give a refund, but the refund is only the value of the wool that he was given. He'll keep the wool that's now dyed the wrong color, and he can go and sell that. Obviously he's out the money that he has to give to the owner of the wool, but he'll receive more money than that when he sells it, and that will compensate him for the amount of labor that he put in to dye it, sadly, the wrong color. Right? So what Rabbi Meir is saying is the owner, even though it was his wool that got dyed the wrong color, he doesn't get all the value of what the dyer now has in his possession, just the value of the wool before it was dyed. Right? So it can be inferred from this Mishnah, the value of his wool, yes, he must give it. But the value of the owner's wool and its enhancement, i.e. the amount by which the value of the wool increased because it was dyed, no, the dyer need not give that to the owner. And if it enters your mind to say that Rabbi Meir holds that one does not acquire an item due to a change in the item, well, then the dyer should be required to return the value of his wool and its enhancement to the owner, as it never left the owner's possession. So rather, isn't it correct to conclude from that Mishnah that Rabbi Meir holds that one acquires an item due to a change in the item? But here, in the case of a stolen animal that was subsequently shorn or gave birth, the payment of wool or offspring is a penalty with which he penalizes the robber so that the robber will not benefit from the increased value of the stolen item, right? Because the dyer acquired the wool legitimately. He made a mistake. He dyed it the wrong color, but that's why. But he's going to acquire it due to its change, and he owes the owner the value of the wool that was delivered unto the dyer, and then the dyer keeps the rest. The robber acquired his, animal, let's say the pregnant animal, illegitimately, and that is why Rabbi Meir is going to penalize the robber and say you do not acquire it thanks to the change that it underwent while it was in your possession, like it does for the dyer. For the robber, no, you don't acquire it, and that's why you have to give it back along with its enhancement, even if that cost you time and labor. And the Gemara affirms this. Learn from the Mishna that this is indeed the reasoning of Rabbi Meir. Now, there are those who say this, i.e. Rabbi Meir's reasoning, was never in question for us. Why not? From the fact that Rav reversed the opinions in the Mishnah on page 96b, and he taught it as follows. If one robbed another of an animal and it aged, or if one robbed another of slaves and they aged, he pays according to what their value had been at the time of the robbery. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis say, with regard to slaves, the robber says to the owner, that which is yours is before you. Certainly then, according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, one acquires an item due to a change in the item, which is why the robber pays according to what its value had been at the time of the robbery. But here, in the case of the cow that gave birth, or the ewe that was shorn, the payment of offspring or wool is a penalty with which he penalizes the robber. Now, the Gemara continues the alternative explanation. So when we ask the question, this is how we asked it. When Rabbi Meir penalizes the robber, is it only for one who robbed intentionally? But if one took an item from its owner unintentionally, Rabbi Meir does not penalize the robber? Or perhaps he penalizes even one who took the item from its owner unintentionally. Unintentionally, but perhaps negligently. Or is he just making no distinction that if you took something that belonged to somebody else, it wasn't yours. You didn't do it on purpose. Okay. But you have to give back what you took, even if its value became enhanced while it was in your possession. Are we going to make this distinction between intentional and unintentional? So the Gemara tries to resolve this question. Come in here a proof from a Baraisa. 5 types of monetary claims are collected only from unsold property, known as mechorarin, i.e. property that is still in the possession of its owner and has not been sold in the meantime. Right? So here we're going to get a little bit into the law of creditors, debtors, and guarantees. Right? So if I have a lien on your property, let's say I lent you $1,000, and I said, okay, I'll lend you $1,000. I mean, I trust you to pay me back, but just in case your circumstances change and you're unable to pay me back, I'm going to have a lien on property that you're pledging as collateral for this loan, right? So we name the property. Let's say it's your car. If you now go and sell the car that was pledged as collateral so that I had a lien on it, and then you don't pay me back the $1,000, so that car is mine. Now you went and sold it to someone else. Now that person who bought the car, maybe he didn't know that that car was the subject of a lien to guarantee the money that I lent you. That's going to be tough luck on him because that car is mine when you don't pay the debt. So I can go after that car and take it. And the purchaser is going to have recourse not to me, but to you. You should not have sold him that car that had a lien on it. So I can go after the car even though it's now in the possession of the person who purchased it from you after you put it up as collateral for the loan that I extended to you. Now, sometimes I can go and pursue, right, that which you have sold. Like in this case, it's obvious because it was put up directly as collateral. But there are some amounts, some values that I cannot go after they've been sold. So, for example, if he went and did work on the car after he bought it from you, can I seize that? Or if, let's just get into it. But the point is that some values are not going to be able to be seized after they've been transferred. So how does that work? These are these 5 categories. Produce and the enhanced value of produce. So even if one has the right to the produce of a particular property, or the grain accrued from that produce, he cannot claim this payment from liened property. And the Gemara continues with the list of monetary claims collected from unsold property. And one who accepts upon himself at the time of his betrothal the obligation to provide sustenance for his wife's son or his wife's daughter from a previous marriage, and a promissory note that has no property guarantee, i.e. a document that does not explicitly state that all the properties of the debtor will serve to guarantee payment of the debt. And similarly, a woman's marriage contract that has no property guarantee along with it. So now the Gemara clarifies. Whom did you hear that says that omission of the guarantee of the sale from the document is not a scribal error? It is Rabbi Meir, right? So in other words, if we have a contract, let's say a purchase and sale where I'm going to pay you over time, or a loan that's going to be guaranteed by some collateral. Now, if we omit property that's going to be used as the guarantee, the majority view is it was omitted by mistake, but nobody would enter into such a contract without some kind of a guarantee. Rabbi Meir would say if it was omitted from the contract, it was omitted from the contract. And we're not going to read into the contract a provision that wasn't there. So they must have negotiated to do a purchase and sale without a guarantee, or they forgot, and the one who would have benefited from the guarantee was negligent, so too bad. There is a dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis with regard to a promissory note, so a debt of instrument, an instrument of debt, that does not contain a property guarantee. According to the rabbis, it was omitted in error and is always considered as having been written into the document. Rabbi Meir holds that a promissory note that does not contain a property guarantee cannot be used to collect property that has been liened or sold. It can be used only to collect property that is still in possession of the owner, right? If we had a property guarantee, then I can go after it even if you sold it. But if we don't have that property guarantee, okay, when you don't pay my debt, the debt to me, I can go after your property that's still in your possession, but not property that you have sold. It can be used to collect only unsold property. So this Baraisa is therefore in accordance with Rabbi Meir's opinion. And the Baraisa teaches that produce and the enhanced value of produce are collected only from unsold property. We're not going to be able to, pursue this right to damages even unto property that the one who owes the money has sold somewhere else, because there was no explicit lien on that property. Now the Gemara clarifies, what are the circumstances in which he collects the enhanced value of produce? So this is a case where one robbed another of a field and then he sold it to another. Right? So for example, maybe I'm an absentee landowner. I own some land, in another country, another state, another locale. I'm never there. I own it. It's in my portfolio. I am aware that I own it, but I haven't visited it in years. And you're a local, in that area, and you say, well, this owner's never coming back here. I'm going to pretend that I own this land, and I'm going to sell it to somebody and get a bunch of money. And so that's what the local does. It's like, hey, you want to buy a bridge? Hey, you want to buy some waterfront property? It's a fraud. So that's what it means to rob me of the land, and then this local person sold it to someone else, right? So in that situation, so in a case where one robbed another of a field, and then he sold it to a third party, and the purchaser enhanced it, right? So the purchaser took over that land. It was just, empty, unused land. I wasn't using it. The local fraudulently sold it. The buyer now, has a nice piece of property, so he invests time and effort and resources and builds up that land. I come to town. I'm like, what the heck's going on? This is my land. So now the land never left my possession because it was fraudulently sold without my awareness. So it's still my land. But what about the value and the work and the resources that the purchaser invested in that land? So the land is now leaving the possession of that buyer. It's going to return to its original owner. And the purchaser enhanced it, and it is now leaving the possession of the purchaser because the robbery victim has proven in court that the field is his. So when the purchaser collects from the robber, right? Obviously, the purchaser is going to go after the robber who defrauded him. When the purchaser collects from the robber who sold him this field in order to recoup what he had paid, he can collect the principal, i.e. what he paid for the field, from the robber's liened property that has been sold, right? So presumably the purchaser, at the time that he purchased the field that he thought belonged to the seller but actually belonged to me, so he had a guarantee that if it turns out that this land deal, was fraudulent or doesn't go through, that he, the buyer, will have a lien on other properties belonging to the seller. I don't know if he has other properties, this robber fraudster, but if he does, the lien in that purchase agreement will cover the purchaser going after the robber's other properties, even if the robber had sold those other properties, because he has a lien. So he can get the value of his principal, what he paid for the land, from the liened properties of the robber. But he can collect the enhanced value, i.e. the value of the improvements that the purchaser made to that field, only from unsold property. What he invested in the land, that time and effort, he can only collect that from property that the robber still owns, not from liened properties that he has sold. Now, why are both of these collected from the robber? Because the owner of the field came and took both his land and its enhanced value. So the Gemara clarifies, what, is it not speaking of a purchaser who is an ignoramus, who does not know whether property can be stolen or cannot be stolen? And when he purchased stolen land from the robber, he did so unintentionally, since he was under the mistaken impression that this land belonged to the robber who sold it. And even so, the owner of the land can come and take the land and its enhanced value. And if so, one may learn from the Baraisa that Rabbi Meir penalizes even one who acquires stolen items unintentionally. And the sages say in response, no, it is speaking of a purchaser who is even a Torah scholar. And he knew that the robber had no right to sell this land. The purchaser is therefore penalized and is required to return the enhanced value of the land as well. I mean, if the purchaser knew that there was a chance, or knew in fact that the land was stolen, that's obviously a different case. And we understand that he's penalized, that he loses everything that he invested in the land. So the Gemara tries to determine the scope of the penalty. Come in here what was taught in a Mishna on page 100b. If one gave wool, and so hold on, let's just read a little bit more about this enhancement that is upon the stolen item. A purchaser is a Torah scholar. So in the case of a field that was stolen and then sold, so this is where the halacha, where the law came out. In the case of a field that was stolen and then sold, and the purchaser enhanced the value of the field, if he knew that the field was stolen at the time of his purchase, he can claim only the principal from the robber. He can claim payment for his expenditures in enhancing the value of the field from the owner of the field. Now, the Rima writes that some say that he cannot claim payment for his expenditures. The Rama writes that if the robber explicitly accepted responsibility to reimburse the purchaser for any expenditures and performed an act of acquisition to render the commitment as binding, then the robber must reimburse the purchaser for his expenditures as well. So interesting that, at least according to one opinion, since the owner, the actual owner of the field, me, came and took the field back with all its enhancements in place, the purchaser can get payment of his principal, what he paid for the field, from the robber and even from his lien properties that have been sold. But for the enhancements that he put into the land, since that land now comes back to me and the enhancements come with it to me, the purchaser, the victim of the robbery, the one who unintentionally bought stolen land and then improved it, he can say to me, well, pay me for the value of what I invested in the land to enhance it, because you're the one, me, who's benefiting from that field. not an illogical argument. Okay, now come in here. What is taught in the Mishna on page 100b? We're back to the case of the sheep's wool that's being dyed. If one gave wool, and by the way, we are in 95b now. If one gave wool to a dyer to dye it red for him and he dyed it black, or to dye it black and he dyed it red, Rabbi Meir says the dyer gives the owner the value, the dyer gives the owner of the wool the value of his wool, since the dyer violated the owner's instructions. And it can be inferred from the Mishnah the value of his wool. Yes, he must give, but the value of his wool and its enhanced value, i.e. the amount by which the value of the wool increased because it was dyed, no, he's not required to give. And if it enters your mind to say that Rabbi Meir penalizes one who acquires a stolen item unintentionally as well, the dyer should be required to return the value of his wool and its enhancement to him. Now, there's no stolen goods here, but he acquired something unintentionally in the sense that he dyed it the wrong color. So rather, must one not conclude from the Mishnah that if it was done intentionally, Rabbi Meir penalizes the robber, but if it was done unintentionally, he does not penalize him. And the Gemara affirms, learn from the Mishnah that this is indeed the reasoning of Rabbi Meir. He distinguishes between one who acquired something that was not his intentionally and one who did it unintentionally. New subject. The Gemara returns to its discussion of the Baraisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, a stolen item is returned as is. Rabbi Shimon says the stolen item is viewed as though it had been monetarily appraised at the time of the robbery. So the Gemara asks, what is the difference between them? Since ostensibly they agree that the robber does not return the value of the enhancement to the robbery victim. So Rav Zevid says they disagree, right? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon disagree with regard to enhancement that is still upon the stolen item. The disagreement concerns a case where the enhancement occurred while the stolen item was in the possession of the robber, and when he returned the item, it was still enhanced. Therefore, he did not keep any of the enhancement. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the enhancement belongs to the one who was robbed, and Rabbi Shimon holds that it belongs to the robber. Right? This is a case where the enhancement necessarily travels with that which was stolen, like if you stole wood and fashioned it into a chair. But on the other hand, if you stole a cow and it gave birth, right? So the calf doesn't necessarily have to travel with the cow when the cow is returned, right? So they're making a distinction, right? So Rabbi Yehuda holds that enhancement that travels with it, right? Like the wood that was built into a chair, belongs to the one who was robbed. And Rabbi Shimon holds that it belongs to the robber. So presumably, either the whole thing is going to go back or he's going to pay the difference. Now, Rav Papa said that the disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is explained differently. Everyone agrees that the enhancement that is still upon the stolen item belongs to the robber because the item was changed. Its enhancement caused a significant change in the item. So the robber acquires the item and he just pays money for what the item was worth when he stole it. And here they disagree with regard to whether the robber can keep 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4 of the value of the enhancement. And the remainder is kept by the owner of the animal. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that the enhancement that is still upon the stolen item belongs entirely to the robber. And Rabbi Shimon holds that the robber takes 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4 of the value of the enhancement. In other words, he is treated as a shepherd or rancher and receives the share of the enhancement that local custom dictates be paid to that kind of laborer. That's why the variations 1/2, 1/3, or 1/4 is according to local custom. What does a shepherd keep of the enhancement to the flock while it's under his care? So the Gemara is sort of like a sharecropper. So the Gemara cites a proof for Rav Zevid's explanation. We learned in the Mishna on page 93b, if one robbed another of a cow and it became pregnant in his possession and it then gave birth, or if one robbed another of a ewe and it became laden with wool in his possession and he then sheared it, so the robber pays according to the value of the animal at the time of the robbery. And so the Gemara infers from the Mishnah, if the cow gave birth, yes, he pays the value of the animal at the time of the theft. But if the cow did not give birth and it is still pregnant, return it as is. So granted, according to the explanation of Rav Zevit, because really, you took a pregnant cow and there's still a pregnant cow. It has not changed, so that which is yours is before you. Restitution has been made. Now granted, according to the explanation of Rav Zevit, who says that according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, enhancement that is still upon the stolen item belongs to the one who was robbed. In accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as the pregnant cow is returned as is. But according to the explanation of Rav Papa, who says that everyone agrees that the enhancement belongs to the robber, in accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? It is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, nor is it in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, as the robber does not retain any of the enhanced value. So the Gemara responds, Rav Papa could have said to you that the inference is incorrect. The same is true, that even if it did not give birth, the robber pays according to the value of the animal at the time of the robbery, and the enhanced value due to the pregnancy is returned to him. And that which the Mishnah teaches, it then gave birth, cannot serve as the basis for an inference pertaining to this discussion, as the Tana needs to cite that it gave birth in the first clause of the Mishnah, since in that case he acquires the animal due to the change in its condition. Therefore he cites that it gave birth in the latter clause as well. But it need not have given birth. It cannot be inferred from this Mishnah that an animal that has not given birth is returned as is. Perhaps there is an augmentation of value, since he stole an animal that was 1 month pregnant and he returned an animal that was 6 months pregnant. And he, fed that animal quite a bit. And it's still a healthy, expecting ewe. And so he enhanced the value of the ewe. And what does he pay? He pays the value of a ewe that was 1 month pregnant, right? And he's returning a 6 month pregnant. So if he returns it as is, perhaps the owner has to actually pay the robber for, the money he invested enhancing the ewe while it was in his possession, according to one view. So, did I read that? Right. So the Gemara notes, it is taught in a Baraisa in accordance with the explanation of Rav Papa. The Baraisa states, Rabbi Shimon says, the stolen item is viewed as though it had been monetarily appraised at the time of the theft for the purpose of keeping 1/2, 1/3, or 1/4 of the value of the enhancement. Rav Ashi said, when we were studying in the study hall of Rav Kahana, we were asked a question. According to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that the robber takes 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4 of the value of the enhancement, like a shepherd would, when we remove the robber, meaning we take the stolen animal from him and pay him a portion of the enhanced value, do we remove him by paying him his share with money? Or perhaps he takes his portion from the meat of the animal. And we resolve the dilemma from that which Rav Nachman says, that Shmuel says. In 3 cases, the court appraises the enhanced value for the parties involved in enhancing a field, and they are paid in money rather than by being given a portion of the property. And these are the 3 cases. Number 1, a firstborn son who makes payment to a regular son. What is this? This is a case where 2 sons, one firstborn and the other not, inherit a field from their father. Before the field is divided, they both work together and they enhance the field. When the time comes to divide the field, the firstborn son who receives a double portion, because that's the law of the firstborn son, he must pay his brother for the enhancement that the brother contributed to the former's portion, to the firstborn's portion. And this payment is given in money rather than in land. The second case is that of a creditor who is obligated to a purchaser, i.e. a creditor who collects the debt from lands that were sold by the debtor. So he pays money to the purchaser for enhancements generated by the purchaser, but does not pay him in land, right? Because the creditor seized land from a purchaser of the debtor. The purchaser had meanwhile enhanced the land. So the creditor who's now seizing the land, he only, is entitled to seize land that was used to guarantee the debt at the value of the land before it was enhanced. So now that the purchaser, worked sweat equity, investment, resources, etc., to enhance the land, the creditor is going to have to pay that purchaser with that, for those enhancements, but with money, not by giving him a piece of the land. And the third case is that of a creditor who is obligated to orphans, i.e. a creditor who collects land from the orphans of his debtor. He must pay them for any enhancements done by the orphans after their father's death. And this payment is also given in money rather than in land. Now the Gemara discusses Shmuel's statement. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, did Shmuel actually say that a creditor gives the purchaser any of the enhanced value at all? But doesn't Shmuel say a creditor collects all of the enhanced value? And Rav Ashi said to him, La kasha, this is not difficult. Here, where Shmuel stated that a creditor does not collect the enhanced value, it was with regard to a case where there was enhancement that reaches the shoulders, i.e. produce that grew due to the improvements made by the purchaser, and it's fully grown and ripened and can now be harvested and carried upon one's shoulders. Right? The purchaser planted a field of wheat, it's fully grown, and it's ready to be harvested. But there, where Shmuel stated that the creditor does collect the enhanced value, it is with regard to a case where there was enhancement that does not reach the shoulders. Okay, the purchaser planted wheat, but he hasn't been tending it and, caring for it and watering it or whatever to the point where it's ready to be harvested. It's just, somewhat enhanced, not so enhanced that it's ready for harvest. Now, Ravina said to him, but there were daily incidents of this type, and Shmuel would collect from purchasers even enhancement that reached shoulders. And Rav Ashi said to him, this is still not difficult. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. So this ruling that Shmuel, hold on, Google Docs asking me to sign back in. Hopefully we're good. Yeah. This ruling that Shmuel would collect the enhanced value is for a case where the creditor is owed by the debtor the amount of the value of the land and the enhanced value. That ruling that Shmuel would not collect the value of the enhancement is for a case where the creditor is owed by the debtor only the amount of the value of the land. So Ravina said to him, this works out well according to the one who says that the purchaser of the field has money, he still cannot remove the creditor from the land, i.e. the creditor has the right to collect the land. This is well. But according to the one who says if the purchaser of the field has money, he can remove the creditor from the land, meaning the purchaser can choose to pay the creditor money instead and keep the field. So according to that view, let the purchaser say, if I had money, I would remove you from the land. Now that I do not have sufficient money to pay you what you are owed, give me at least a sa of land, which is the amount of my enhancement. And Rav Ashi said to him, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where the debtor set aside this field as designated repayment for him, as he said to him, you shall not be repaid from anything but this, in which case he clearly has a lien on this field and nothing else. That's where we'll knock off. And I just have a couple of comments or questions from Sharon. If the animal dies in giving birth, does the robbery victim get the calf? That's such an interesting question, right? That would be sort of like the produce of the field, but the field is gone. So, I think what we've seen is that what's, pretty solidly agreed to is that the victim's going to be made whole. The victim is owed minimally what the animal was worth at the time that it was stolen, right? So a cow is worth a lot more than a calf. So in that situation, it seems like the robber owes the value of the cow, perhaps a pregnant cow. Assuming it was pregnant at the time that it was stolen, so he owes the value of a pregnant cow. All he's got is a calf. So that's not going to be enough to make the victim whole. And I think, whether the robber, uses the calf as part of the payment and the rest is money or all money, he owes that whole amount. So I don't think that we would say that the owner receives the money. I think what you're asking is, does he receive the money, that is the value of what the pregnant cow was worth, and he gets the calf, at least under the ruling of Rabbi Meir, right? Because Rabbi Meir would say, yeah, well, what you took remained his, so the offspring is his as well, because as a penalty payment because of the robber. According to the majority, I think he's only owed the value of the pregnant cow, and then the calf could be used to satisfy that partially or not. That's the way I understand it. And Sharon also says, kidnapping is biblically a capital crime. This week's Parsha. Is stealing a slave treated as kidnapping as slaves are considered as humans, Hebrew or otherwise? It's a really interesting question. I think that what I read just in Rashi this week is that it's interesting. Kidnapping is a capital crime, but not every case of kidnapping. When kidnapping becomes a capital crime, I believe as Rashi defines it, is when a person steals another human, works him like a slave or abuses him, etc., and then sells that human as a slave, right? So this would be like, this is, when in the days of shipping in the Mediterranean, sailing ships, and if one was caught, by certain North African countries, they would take all the sailors and passengers and put them in the galleys, right, to row as slaves, usually to death, and then maybe they would be sold off the ship. So that for sure, the ones who kidnapped them and worked them and sold them, that's a capital offense. Just taking a person and saying, pay me ransom or I won't give him back to you, is not necessarily a death penalty crime. So, interesting view there. But what you're asking is a slave treated like a free man, right? So when slavery was practiced, was stealing a slave equivalent to stealing a free person and then enslaving them? I don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing not, but I don't know offhand. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Wednesday, for page 96. Have a great night.